Good evening and welcome to our Master Planning and Visioning session, what we're calling Phase 2. My name is David Young. I'm the superintendent. I'm happy to be here. We have a pretty full evening, so I hope you're ready to do a lot of listening and comprehending because we have a lot to share. I do want to just do some quick introductions. Some of you probably know some of these folks already, but we have some board members here, so I just want to ask them just to stand up and give a raise of hand. Elizabeth Fitzgerald, our board chair's here. Brian Minier is here. Martin Lalonde is here. And Bridget Burkhart is somewhere. Oh, here she is. Yes, over here in the corner. Thank you, Bridget. Yeah. Also, I want to just recognize some of our administrators that are here also that have been part of the process around the master planning vision. Pat Burke, our high school principal, you're going to hear from him as well in just a minute. Carson Slenter, who's out back, I think. Mike Martin, our director of learning, you'll hear from him in a little bit. Gary Marquis, Gary's out back. A quick hand wave, Gary. Yeah, our director of operations and finance. We also have Lissa McDonald, our assistant principal high school. Mike Jabor, our athletic director here. John Craig, our assistant principal, are here as well. We also have our student reps, so Cole and Arnell. Just you got to stand up and be recognized too for your good work. Thank you. Yeah, awesome. Also, Carl and Ken, Carl with IT and Ken doing RETN. Important to note, RETN's recording. So before I turn it over to Bridget, I just want to say again, my charge as the superintendent of schools was charged by the board to take a look at specifically the functionality of the middle school and the high school, looking at both the educational delivery but also with the facility. And so what this process alludes to is looking at both the facility and educational functionality, and this again is that work, or it's the process that we have gone through to get there. So what you're going to hear tonight will be a lot of that information, and again, we are going to leave, and Bridget will go over this, you're going to leave some time for you to be able to ask us questions, certainly this evening as well as we go on. So without further ado, I'll welcome Bridget Burkhart, one of our board members. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And I'll just flash up here the agenda. I won't go through it. David pretty much walked you through it. But I will move on to talk about why we're here tonight. I wanted to just frame the task for the evening before we really got into it. The district really hopes tonight to share with you a brief summary of the master planning and visioning process for the middle school and high school to date, outline briefly what we've learned so far, share early stage, and I'll emphasize the early stage options developed by our architects, Dora and Whittier, that respond to what we've learned, and collect feedback and questions from you. In order to keep within the tight time frame we've allotted for tonight's meeting and cover a lot of information, we hope to save other topics for future meetings. Examples of these would include master planning at the elementary schools, details of potential designs for either the high school or the middle school, and the precise amount of funding that the community might support. We hope to keep things at the 30,000-foot level for tonight, reflective of where we are in the master planning and visioning process and the district's decision-making. To be clear, the board has not yet made any decision about taking any potential project forward, and this will not be the community's last chance to weigh in with respect to any potential project. You should have received an exit card when you came in, and if you did not, there are a pile of them outside. We'd be most grateful if you would jot down thoughts and questions as you listen to the information presented and leave those cards with us as you exit tonight. So, without further ado, why are we here tonight and how did we get here? A few years ago, the district came to the realization that we needed to take a closer look at the middle school and high school buildings and determine what, if anything, should be done to update or change them. This realization was driven by a few factors. There were discussions during the elementary school master planning task force, which concluded its work in 2016. There was a lot of feedback from parents, students, faculty, and staff at both schools. We ran into challenges as we tried to maintain the buildings. We had been doing what we consider a good job of updating our long-term stewardship plan, but we were finding that just wasn't enough. We were taking care of smaller projects on an annual basis, but the larger ones were often rescheduled to later years. When we did try to do some of the more significant, bigger projects like elevators and window replacements, we ran into unforeseen challenges with the infrastructure of the buildings or came across hazardous materials that had to be remediated. We realized that even our long-term maintenance plan was a somewhat reactive document that was trying to respond to a host of challenges posed by aging buildings. We determined that we needed an architect to do a thorough review of both buildings. And if we were going to consider major changes to the infrastructure of the buildings, we decided we also needed to take the time to review how well the buildings were supporting the educational program of the district and determine whether we should make further improvements while addressing infrastructure issues. So we asked Durham Whittier to address these key questions that are up here right now as they helped us review the buildings. Phase 1 focused on the physical site and buildings, and we wanted to know what is the physical condition of the middle and high schools and the site they're on. How much money will need to be expended annually to address necessary capital improvements? Phase 2 assessed the educational program. We asked ourselves as a district, what is the educational program we want to deliver now, and how will it change in the future? Then we asked Durham Whittier to help us study how well the current buildings support the current educational program. In other words, how do they impact the achievement of the district's ends? How adaptable are the buildings to future educational programs? What are the master plan options that best respond or that best position the district to align educational practices and facilities? How much would each option cost in comparative terms? How long would each option take? And how much disruption to students and the community would each option cause? Phase 1 started in the fall of 2017 and wrapped up with a report to the school board at a meeting last spring. Phase 2 began over this past summer, and we are nearing its conclusion. We'll talk more about the completion of Phase 2 later in the presentation. And with that, I'll turn it over to Rob Fitzgerald from Durham Whittier to walk through a summary of the results of Phase 1.
Thanks, Bridget. So before we get started in review of the buildings, I'd like to go over a few things that we typically review while we're looking at the buildings. Number one, the codes. They've changed significantly over the past 50 years, as you can imagine. Fire and life safety, handicap accessibility, the amount of air flow that comes into the building, energy and water efficiency, and as you'll soon see in both of these buildings, the building infrastructure systems have exceeded their expected lifespan. Most of the infrastructure systems are expected to last 25 to 35 years, and both of these buildings are over 50. So taking a look at the South Burlington High School, it's got about 151,000 square feet, originally built in 1960, had renovations and additions done in 77 and 78, and we've got about 942 students. So you'll see the yellow areas are the additions that were added in 77 and 78 for a total of 151,000 square feet. So what we did as part of this process is we brought through a team of architects and engineers, electrical, mechanical, structural, civil, walked through the site and the building inside and out, took photographs and documented the building and put together a report. That report you'll find on the district website if anyone's interested. I'm just going to give a brief overview tonight because we've already given this presentation, but this is just to bring everybody up to speed. So taking a look at the site quickly on the high school, one of the biggest issues is the impact of cars and pedestrians. So here you can see this is a significant issue for buses, parent drop-off, student drop-off, or student parking, and pedestrians. Looking at the structural aspects of the building, it's very structurally sound. However, there are areas that are showing its age. There's some brick movement and cracking and some rusting around the building. Mechanical systems, the boiler plant itself is about 22 years old, which is relatively young in relation to everything else. Most of the rest of the mechanical systems are original to the building. The the controls for the heating system, this lower right-hand picture, you can see this is a pneumatic compressor. So that is controlling the heating in the school. As you can see, it's antiquated. I think there's one guy in the state that knows how to repair them. Plumbing and fire protection. So in 1977, they added a sprinkler system, but they only added it for the additions. So the entire 1960 portion of the building does not have a sprinkler system. Other items include this extremely large hot water storage tank. It's very inefficient, should be replaced. And all the plumbing fixtures should be updated for water conservation. Electrical speaking, you can see in the far right-hand corner here, these are the original electrical service. It's originally designed as for 3,000 amps. Today, you're only using 400 amps. All of these panel boards, the manufacturers are no longer around, so parts to replace them are difficult. You should have a backup power generator for this size of a building, and the fire alarm system should be upgraded as well. Taking a look at the exterior portion of the building, the roofs are in need of replacement. The school's been replacing, small segments at a time, but there are large areas that are still in need of replacement. Back in the 60s, these were designed as flat roofs, so there's a significant ponding. Many of the windows have been replaced, but there are also many more windows that are still in need of replacement. Going to the interior, as you can see, much of the flooring is all original. We've got concerns with handicap accessibility throughout the building, from here in the auditorium to the band room, toilet rooms, the lab casework, and the science labs are all original. Moving on to the Tuttle Middle School, it's about 120,000 square feet, built in 1967. There have not been any additions or significant renovations over the last 50 years. And here also, there's also site concerns in terms of safety for pedestrians. So we've got students and other people that are parking here, students traveling back and forth from the middle school to the high school, going across this parking lot, which a lot of times feels like a raceway. When cars come in here, they just come down here and drop off or park. Then you have buses that are going around here as well. So you've got all this vehicular traffic. Meanwhile, students and other people are trying to cross over. Structurally, again, the building overall is very sound, but there are signs of age. There are a number of conditions like this one where there's horizontal cracking observed due to freeze-thaw action. Number of other cracks, nothing, again, nothing structurally significant in terms of to be concerned about, but it is showing its age, and there are areas that need repair. Looking at the mechanical system, similar to the high school. Many of the systems here are original vintage. Some parts and pieces have been replaced over the years as they have failed, but building-wide, it's in need of a complete replacement. Plumbing and fire protection, there's a limited area sprinkler system that serves the boiler room and the storage rooms, but the rest of the building is not sprinklered. And again, much of the plumbing systems are original. And I feel like a broken record here. Just looking at the electrical system, again, these are vintage 1967 components. Upgrades to the fire alarm system are recommended, and conversion of the lighting to LED. Looking at the exterior, this roof is what's called an unreinforced PVC roof. It's way beyond its lifespan. There's some significant shrinkage and pulling away of the roof. You can see over here and over here where it's starting to crack the brick. So these are things that really are in need of upgrade and repair. All the windows are all original as well. Looking at the interior, you see we've got original locker rooms, original casework that are not handicap accessible. This wired glass at one time was a fire safety item, but now it's a fire safety hazard. If someone breaks through it, they injure their hand. And handicap accessibility is a significant concern in this building as well. So just giving a summary of this, the high school's just about 60 years old, middle school is 52. Much of the HVAC, electrical plumbing systems are original. Roofing systems are in need of replacement. One thing I didn't touch on, which we will talk about a little bit later, is that 50% of the middle school does not have any natural light. It's a very wide building, and that has an impact to student learning. And what has changed since the original construction, so as I mentioned before, codes and regulations, accessibility, energy efficiency, ventilation, student safety, and just understanding the impact on a healthy learning environment. So with that, I'll pass this back to Bridget to provide an overview of the Phase 2 process.
Thank you, Bob. So Phase 2 has entailed a lot of thoughtful work on the part of a lot of people in the district and the wider community. A working group was formed last summer that has met at least a few times a month since then. The group includes administration, staff, the architects, and board members. At several points, input was sought from a wider group of faculty, staff, students, and community members. Many channels of research fed into the Phase 2 work. For example, the district works with a professional demographer to update its enrollment projections every couple of years, and we'll talk about that more in a minute. As part of its most recent accreditation process with NEASC, faculty and staff spent the past year in deep conversations about the direction of education in South Burlington. Dora Whittier has a specialized team that focuses on educational facilities, and they conducted in-depth principals workshops that gathered faculty and staff and students to answer questions about how the facilities do or do not support the educational program here in South Burlington. We've had 2 community visioning sessions where we brought together community members, faculty, staff, students, and board members to provide their feedback on the buildings and educational program itself. A group of faculty, staff, and board members visited schools in Massachusetts and Shelburne to learn what kinds of changes to facilities most effectively support new teaching methods. And of course, as with all our work in the district, we have to ask ourselves, does this support the achievement of the district's ends? This list is not exhaustive, but hopefully gives you a sense of the depth of the process to date. So let us turn to one of the first questions we asked ourselves. How many students do we support now, and how many are we expected to support in the future? There's a lot of information on the next couple of slides, and I would invite you to review it more carefully on the district website, where it might be easier to read. To summarize, our demographer expects that the enrollment at the middle school will increase over the next decade from approximately 575 students today to 632 in 10 years, an increase of roughly 10%. The high school is expected to see increasing enrollment over the next 10 years as well. From approximately 921 students today, it's expected to grow to 1,045 students by 2029, an increase of 13%. It's easy to get caught up in the statewide narrative that student enrollment is declining. That is simply not the case in South Burlington, nor in most of Chittenden County. With those enrollment figures in mind, we examine the current capacity of our existing buildings. The Vermont Department of Education gives 160 square feet per student as a guideline for the capacity of middle schools. Based on those guidelines, our middle school has an approximate capacity of 750 students. Our current and expected 10-year enrollment projections would appear to show that we have enough space at the middle school. However, students and faculty at the middle school will point out that given changes in teaching methods and student activities, we find ourselves with some facilities at the middle school that are oversized and some that are too small for their intended use. The high school is a different story entirely. The Vermont Department of Education gives 180 square foot per student as the guideline for high school capacity. We are already significantly over that capacity, which would be estimated at 880 students. So we have a current enrollment of 921, so we're already bursting at the seams in certain areas. And we will continue to be squeezed even more as the high school enrollment increases. As we dive into the educational vision of the district, I want to focus all of you on the district's ends policy, developed through a multi-year process with the community, which guides the work of the board and the broader work of the district. The ends summarize what we hope to help the students of South Burlington develop for themselves in order to prepare them for life after high school. They are a disposition for lifelong learning, academic proficiency, personal development, and citizenship. I'd now like to introduce Mike Martin, our Director of Learning, to take you through a deeper look at the district's educational vision.
Good evening. My name is Michael Martin. I'm the Director of Learning for the school district. It's strange to think about it, but our current middle school and high school were built before we put a man on the moon, before there was commercial jet service at the Burlington International Airport, and before South Burlington even incorporated as a city. So I guess it's no surprise that our school's architecture reflects the industrial model for education that prevailed at the time. Our schools were designed to maximize the number of students by having individual rooms lined up on both sides of a hallway, like small boxes within a box. This was an efficient way to use space given the educational model at the time. The 19th and 20th century model of education was fairly simple. The teacher held all of the knowledge, and the students were like empty vessels to be filled with this knowledge. The teacher would stand at the front of the classroom and write at the chalkboard or lecture in order to impart this knowledge. The students would sit quietly in straight rows, receive the information, and try to record it in their notebooks so they could repeat it back on the day of the test, hopefully in the exact same way that the teacher presented it. Today, 2 decades into the 21st century, we know that this approach is obsolete, even though we still work in buildings and classrooms from the industrial model. The skill of rote memorization, followed by regurgitation of information, is not enough for our students to be successful. So straight rows of desks with the teacher lecturing from the front is simply outdated. Now that each of us can access nearly unlimited amounts of information from the phones in our pockets, what students can actually do with information has become much more important than simply receiving information and repeating it back on a test. We've also learned that for our students to be college and career ready, that they need to be better collaborators and communicators. And these are the skills that top colleges and employers keep telling us they're looking for. These transferable skills will help our students successfully complete college, hopefully in 4 years, or as they move from career to career. These skills will also serve our students well, even as many current professions disappear, while automation and globalization reshape the workforce as we know it. The good news is that our district is working very hard to provide students with these new skills. These are our district ends, and they identify the skills and dispositions we want all students to develop before we send them out into the world. However, when we do try to teach these skills, we bump into our buildings. Our current classroom spaces are not conducive to in-depth collaboration or design work, and our schools do not have spaces for teamwork and exhibitions of learning. Our schools were simply not designed for that back in 1960 and 1967. So what should a school look like today? Well, first, it should reflect the new brain research that tells us how students learn best. A modern school has flexible spaces within classrooms and throughout the building that allow for collaborative, iterative design work. Today, schools need to emphasize the importance of community with small, medium, and large spaces to bring groups together for meetings, performances, and exhibitions of learning. A school building also needs to incorporate what we know about wellness, with an emphasis on natural light over fluorescent lights, which can cause fatigue. A school today should not be designed to constrain student movement, but rather encourage learner autonomy, with open spaces that cultivate student responsibility and provide for passive supervision. Finally, today's learning spaces need to fully integrate digital and traditional learning resources so that students can learn to regulate their technology use and draw on a range of tools to develop problem-solving and creativity skills. So for now, we're doing the best we can with the learning spaces we have. The high school has replaced traditional exam week with culminating activity period, or CAP week. Instead of sitting through exams, during CAP week, students are asked to provide evidence of learning through performance tasks, scored discussions, or exhibitions. These types of assessments require students to apply their new learning and also develop skills such as problem solving, public speaking, creativity, data analysis, and the effective use of technology. Our middle school has been working to develop these same skills through project-based learning, personalized learning plans, and student-led conferences. Teachers and students are doing the best they can to make these shifts in learning and teaching, but our buildings don't lend themselves to this new curriculum. Whether we look at the design of our classrooms or our buildings, we're still literally operating within the box, with one-size-fits-all space limitations. We will soon be 20 years into the 21st century, but we're still working in spaces for a 19th century model of education. We know today, based on the last 50 years of nationally recognized educational assessments and brain research, that each student is different in the way they learn, the way they think, and the way they perform best. Looking forward to the next 50 years, if we're to expect our students to compete with other students around the world in both college and the workplace, it is our responsibility to create an educational learning environment to support flexible, collaborative, inspiring spaces for students to learn. So with that, I want to invite my colleague, Patrick Burke, up. No, you, please, please.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, my name is Patrick Burke. I'm proud to be principal at the high school. Before I begin, I'm going to be talking about middle and high school, so I just wanted to acknowledge my colleague Carson Slenter at the middle school, who, as we work together on these remarks, so thank you, Carson. And so to us, this actually isn't about a building. This is about education. Popular culture is full of stories that celebrate the hero teacher, whether it was Robin Williams inspiring a love of literature in his Dead Poets Society, School of Rock's Jack Black teaching math by way of Hendrix, AC/DC, and the Stones, or Miss Frizzle putting her middle school students on her magic school bus to teach them the concepts of science. These stories resonate because they acknowledge the most important elements of a quality education are dedicated and skilled teachers. All of these stories skillfully presented the content the students were learning as more or less the conventional lore, what conventional lore typically finds to be acceptable. Rote memorization, classic literature, and science exploration with a focus on the individual. Importantly, these stories tell of teachers who adjusted their methods so that students could access their education at a level the students had not experienced before. Why are so many inspirational stories about education focused on a teacher who does not do their job in a traditional way? And why can so many children and adults relate? Think about it. Public schools in America are the only place in the world, literally, where everyone of a certain age in a city or town come together with a purpose. The concept of a comprehensive high school isn't just for movies and TV shows. It is a uniquely American concept and one which is central to the American dream. Schools' missions are in part to serve individual learners, but mostly it's a communal charge. South Burlington middle and high schools welcome everyone, and this is our students', let's face it, final time in their lives where everyone will be together. Our learners are diverse in so many ways, but still unified beyond all else. In a few weeks, in this auditorium, I'll be meeting with the class of 2019. And as I do every year, I ask them this question. I will say to them, hey, when you're somewhere else in Vermont and somebody says, where do you go to high school? And you say, I go to South Burlington. Ever notice how often they say to you, oh, that's a good school? And you can see the heads nod in the room, and the kids are kind of like, yeah, actually, that does happen to me a lot. And I tell them, well, I'm principal, and when I meet other principals from around the state, I tell them I'm principal at South Burlington, and they say, oh, yeah, that's a good school. So right here in this room, I remind them that they should be proud to have earned this South Burlington diploma, but also proud of the fact that they contributed to this legacy. And when I'm closing that meeting, I remind them that as citizens, it's their responsibility to contribute similarly to a more broad environment. For some, it's Vermont. For others, it's our region, our nation, and still more, the world. Though when built, they were acclaimed to be state-of-the-art, it wasn't the bricks and mortar of Frederick Tuttle Middle School and South Burlington High School that made these places they are, but rather the community's value for education that literally put the city of South Burlington on the map. When we opened in '61, the South Burlington School District, fun fact, known as Chittenden West at the time, collaborated with Richmond and Williston to serve special education students off campus. In the early 60s and 70s, only 70% of Vermont's high school students graduated. Within a decade, South Burlington had opened a middle school and greatly increased its on-campus inclusivity, and we had a dropout rate of under 4%. In that same decade, the Vermont dropout rate was still 30% in 1970. So here we are today. We're definitely not perfect, but our work continues. And you've already heard from Mike Martin that teaching, and indeed education itself, is no longer about filling students' heads with knowledge. Rather, it's about helping students become creative and practical in solving problems through research and collaboration. It's about helping students be able to analyze, apply, integrate, communicate, and yes, even invent through regular and dynamic interaction with peers, with adults, and with experts in the community. Students have told us they want their building and campus to be safe, yet they also crave an open environment where they experience the trust and autonomy they need to become self-directed, responsible, and involved citizens. Side note, they also want the north lot paved, and if I don't mention that, the juniors are going to kill me. South Burlington identified these 5 areas as so critical to our students' success after high school that the school board included these transferable skills, as part of our graduation requirements. So some things are the same and will remain the same. Letter grades, GPAs, and high academic expectations will always be important. But gone are the days of teachers lecturing basic facts for 40 minutes. Gone are distinct subjects with no interrelation or integration. Nobody is telling us that the old-fashioned, knowledge-focused education is what our students need to be successful. Not colleges, not higher ed, not employers, and not the military. And so, you can walk down the halls of Tuttle or South Burlington High School during the school day, and you'll see groups of students sitting on the floor in the hallways, on benches in the lobbies, and even sometimes under the stairs in the stairwells as they collaborate and learn together. Often you will see teachers conferring or assessing students in the small entryway foyers of their classrooms, one eye on the student with whom they're interacting, one eye on their classroom. It is not uncommon at Tuttle or the high school for a teacher to start their class in one room or at one school, only to move across the school or across the parking lot to access space or equipment that is more suitable for learning. And if you're walking in the halls of the high school after school, watch out, because over 100 track athletes are sprinting, jumping, and hurdling throughout the building. Our schools were not designed for what we endeavored to do, and to be fair, very few were in the 50s and 60s. In order to continue to deliver on our charge, we need flexible team spaces and natural light at Tuttle Middle School. And both schools need research and design labs that bring science, math, and technology together in a way that makes integration and collaboration efficient. A middle school designed with multiple, pliable, small learning spaces will help prepare students for a high school where they will readily move from large group instruction to small group collaboration and/or exhibition. South Burlington students need a middle and high school design where students with a passion for the visual and performing arts can have multiple flexible spaces to learn, to display their work, and to perform. We need a school where students' wellness is supported by easy access to high-quality nutrition and healthy activities during and after school. The high school in Tuttle, like all school buildings of yesteryear, are marked with these long, often dark, narrow hallways, and the few renovations that were done in the 70s only exacerbated handicap access issues and fostered detachment. Our middle and high school design is unfortunately conducive to isolation and division, and groups can withdraw to a specific wing or hallway. And it has made it difficult for school officials to monitor all building locations and maintain order in an unobtrusive way. The changes a renovation or new build would bring to the middle and high schools will be far more than changes to the buildings. Changes in educational design will provide our middle and high school students with environments that will ensure the proud tradition of high-quality education in South Burlington will continue to be a distinguished component of this community. And before I turn it over to Lee Dorr, I just want to quickly put up and refer directly to a few slides that may illustrate exactly what I'm talking about. So right here is this is a map of the high school. On the right-hand side is the second floor, and on the left-hand side is our first floor. And you will see that our science, math, and engineering and technology departments and classrooms and equipment are not only not on the same, not near each other, they're not even on the same level. And then art. Most students don't really know how to get to the art room until like middle of sophomore year. You know, the only way oftentimes you can get to the art room is, believe it or not, by walking through the gym. And so, again, you know, and much of the equipment, 3D printers, all sorts of different computer modeling that we want to use for courses like physics and art, but also for design courses. That equipment is most often housed in the engineering and technology section. And so again, this is just a graphical representation of how disparate and spread out all of these. Now this is an actual, you saw this slide before Mike Martin put up, this is actually our school. These are like the original blueprints. And so this, I believe, is what the students will commonly refer to as the math wing, which of course, as you know, means we also teach science and health and history in that area. So, you know, and this is just a classic representation of those, you know, boxed classrooms. And so this is like what it could look like. And the ELA, the shaded green areas, that represents extended learning areas. That's what ELA stands for there. And so there you see where you may have a couple of science classrooms, a couple of math classrooms that feed into these extended learning areas. So a teacher could very easily, you know, have students working with each other on a math science project, with students from another section or another class in that extended learning area. And also, we would continue to maintain that kind of passive supervision that I was talking about before. There's actually a local example of this, and some of the slides that you've seen have been from the Shelburne Community School. I visited the Shelburne Community School last year, observing a teacher candidate for a position here at the high school. And so I saw it not only in the pictures, I saw it in action. And what they have been able to do is really create these very pliable spaces for their students. So at times, you would see the teacher presenting some material, students kind of working in groups, then boom, they would go out into different parts of the wing or parts of their so-called house where they would you know, be able to work independently or collaborate with others. This is the top depiction is existing middle school wing, and so there you see it's kind of like your classic, you know, hallway down the outside, and then classrooms on the inside. And so you can imagine very little collaboration is happening in that environment. And then in this environment here, you have on the bottom, which is a design of a middle school wing. You see where students would walk in through this one area right here. So students would walk in, students would walk in here, and now they're in this house area, and these classrooms can all be accessed from within this house, and then same thing over here. So if you can imagine a team setup, that's what a better design or a more progressive design for what we are actually doing at the middle level in South Burlington. So the next person up is Lee Dorr from Dorr Whittier. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Patrick. We want to continue the conversation, and you've heard now a lot from a lot of people of what we're up against, and I'm going to try and talk about some potential conceptual opportunities to solve some of these problems that we've heard tonight. And just, this is what we're kind of walking into to start with, and this kind of summarizes everything that we heard. For the middle school, the layout existing from 1967 isn't supporting the education that we see is happening already within the district and is going to continue on for the foreseeable future. The lack of cohesiveness and identity of teams, right now the middle school teaches grade level teams and they're scattered across the building. They're not together in some of those depictions that Patrick was just showing us. There's a lack of space for collaboration for teachers and students. It's that kind of one-size-fits-all model that was developed back in the early 60s, and that just doesn't work today. There's no space to do project-based learning, those extended learning areas that we've been talking about. Special education, being able to integrate that right into the teams is really important. And certainly we talked about 50% of the middle school without natural light, and we know how important that is now. And Bridget mentioned earlier, while overall the square footage of the middle school seems adequate, there's a lot of opportunities there where classrooms are too small, or the media center is too big, or the gym's too small. So overall, it's probably the right size, but the space isn't in all the right places. High school is very similar. The building, again, doesn't support the current curriculum and future curriculum. Again, lack of collaboration space. Patrick illustrated pretty well how all of the programs are spread through different levels and in different wings of the buildings. The classrooms are severely undersized at the high school. The boxes that we just looked at, those are about 725 square feet. We see those today being somewhere between 850 and 900 square feet. And overall, we saw that image before where we're over capacity quite a bit at the high school already. So where did we get started? This cocktail napkin sketch is not where we landed. This is where we started. And this was out of the principals' workshops where we sat down and we said, let's forget about everything that we have in our existing buildings, blank canvas. And if we were going to organize a school building today and put the programs and the appropriate adjacencies, how would we organize this building? So this was just a conceptual start about how we set up, and this particular one is the middle school. And these are the grade level teams, 7th and 8th grade, 6th. We've even looked at what happened to 5th grade, moved up. The library being the heart of the school, related arts, kitchen and cafeteria together, and then gym. And what we're also looking to do is provide clear separation so the building can be more functional for the community. So we could close off the academic wing from the public areas. The same concept happened at the high school as well. So here's the sketch that we started with the high school. And the high school was a little bit different. It's not so much in teams as we're kind of developing, they're almost thematic academies where we're putting related programs close together. So we have these, an arts wing, I'll just use this, an arts wing. We talked about STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, trying to get those related programs closer together, a humanities section, and a leadership section. The library, it kind of looks like a glove. We want kind of spread out so that information source is available to all of those teams. A cafeteria kind of integrated into the heart of the school, something that doesn't look anything like we have today. We really want to deinstitutionalize that space. So this is where we started from, and then we try and take these bubble diagrams and we start translating this stuff into more conceptualized plans that I'm going to get into. And we have to figure out how to evaluate these plans. So what the working group that was established for this phase 2 process, there's 7 categories that we're trying to match up these options to. Education, how well they serve the future education. Are the options that we're presenting student-centered, and they're going to support wellness and support the faculty and collaboration? Are we fixing the issues on site and circulation and separation of pedestrians and vehicles? Is there good community access? Sustainability, all of these buildings, when they're either renovated or new construction, we want to make sure they're energy efficient and healthy buildings for the occupants. And we really needed to look at, and this is an important piece, if we were going to do something, how do we build these? And how do we keep the schools up and operational on the sites while we're doing that? And certainly cost is an important piece. How does that relate to all of these different options? So we'll start with option 1. Option 1, you guys are quite familiar with the existing site. And what I just want to point out here is we were looking for areas, if we were going to do construction, what opportunities did we have on the site? So the north side of the middle school where the varsity baseball field is was one opportunity. And there's some more opportunities potentially over behind the student parking lot where the varsity football field used to be. An important consideration we did as an assumption across all of these options was, since the track and field facility was new, we said, let's try and keep that intact and build around it. And so all of these options you're going to see kept that as kind of the anchor. It was a sacred cow, and we didn't touch that. It's not saying that we can't change these in the future, but that's the way we started. So for the middle school, option 1 really addresses the phase 1 that we talked about. We're not making any educational improvements in option 1. This is just, how do we extend the life of these buildings for the next 50 years? All of these options we're trying to show you right now are looking for 50-year solutions. So this identifies, I'm not going to go through this whole list, but all the things Rob talked about that needed to be replaced. And when we're all done, you're not going to see a lot of this stuff. You'll see new paint and new finishes, but all the infrastructure is really going to be behind the ceilings and the walls, and we're not moving any of the walls around to improve education. This is the first floor. The second floor, very similar. Right now, science is all clustered together. Originally, this was designed as a junior high model, so it kind of looks like a small high school from the 60s. Classrooms are clustered together. Not all of them are the right size right now. Art is way over in the corner of the building. Band and chorus are separated with locker rooms upstairs and downstairs for the gymnasium as well. How do we approach building something like this is really important, because we can't leave the students in the space while we're renovating it. And there's no swing space foreseeable in the district where we can take 700 kids and move them somewhere for a couple of years. So we have to actually build this while the students are in the school. So in this scenario, it's actually a 5-phase plan. And the first phase is really creating this portable classroom village. And we need to take sections of the building. We're going to divide it up into 3 pieces, and we'll just cycle kids from this end of the building into the portable, so we leave this area for the general contractor to be able to come in and renovate, and we cycle through the building in phases. This takes a long time. This could take upwards of 3 years to be able to complete. And one of the big problems with this is that money that we spent on creating that portable village of classrooms that's going to have fire alarms and ADA access, you know, it's got heat and power and fire alarm and security systems, all that money drives away at the end of the project. So we really need to think and weigh those options of the cost of temporary facilities that you don't really get any benefit from. Is that a good, viable, long-term solution? So at the high school, it's the same deal where we're just replacing the infrastructure issues. We're not changing the floor plan around at all. Again, we run into some of the same issues here. This is the second floor, keeping everything in the same place. It's still departmentally organized. How would we build something like this? Is actually 7 phases. And again, we're starting with building some portable classrooms in a couple of different areas where we can on the site. And you can see each of these boxes we're going to be cycling through. Contractor comes in, takes over an area, and does the renovations. So this is, again, another 3-year project. And it's very intrusive to education. If any of you have lived through renovations in your home, you know what it's like going through this. Think about the students being in there every day, working with contractors on the other side. Option 2, we take care of everything we just talked about in phase 1. But what we wanted to do here was start to address some of the educational issues. So this is a representative example. We chose the top 3 priorities at the middle school that were identified for us, and that was the team's geography, the relation of the classrooms to one another, the cafeteria zones, trying to deinstitutionalize that space and make it more multifunctional. And there's a lack of gym space at the middle school. If you've been in there trying to watch a game, there's really no room outside of the court. So we've added a small addition here, down in the lower right-hand corner. This is just to be able to create some bleacher space. We're creating some breathing room so you can actually walk in the front door without walking right into the middle of the basketball game. You can see the start of the attempt to cluster classrooms together. So, here is 4 classrooms clustered together with some special education. There's that extended learning area where these can flow out here to do project-related spaces. Again, there's small rooms, big rooms, and that's really one of the things that we're seeing. Right now, you've got kind of a one-size-fits-all, and that's not what we're looking for in the future. We're breaking up the science labs and we're bringing science. So there's a science classroom associated with each of these teams. The media center, we've taken over a little bit of the space. That was one of the spaces in that building that I said that is oversized, what it needs to be right now. So we took a little bit of that real estate back and turned that into extended learning areas. The cafeteria remains the same size, but what we are gonna try and do initially in both the media center and the cafeteria is trying to bring in some small light wells to try and get some natural light into those spaces. Again, in an attempt to address some of those concerns. The boys and girls locker rooms, right now the girls locker room is on the second floor. We brought that down to the first floor. We've grouped art together with a fab shop, next to the art with an extended learning area over in the top right. On the second floor, you can see, again, you're starting to see some pretty good identity related to the teams, where we've got science and related classrooms again, each for grades 6 through 8. The science block that was here, you can see that we've blown that apart. There's that opening in the roof to try and get light below down to the media center, and also to these extended learning areas that are around it. Same in the middle of the building. Here's another light well, trying to bring stuff in. We renovate the band and chorus rooms. Right now they're separated by the guidance room, which we move across the hall, and kind of a health and wellness area with an extended learning center as well. And where we displaced the girls' locker room upstairs, we've added a movement studio as a part of the program. So this is taking a longer step into solving some of those educational issues, but it certainly isn't solving all of them. We have the same issues because we're not creating a lot of new space to be able to move students into. We're going to run through the similar scenario for phasing. So again, it's building those portable classrooms and rotating students through. And again, this one is a 2 to 3 year construction project. At the high school, this is the attempt. The priorities that were given to us here was primarily the cafeteria and kitchen, which has been on the list in the district for at least the last decade of trying to expand that and create a more modern facility. The science department needs a complete overhaul. It's something that's been cited in the NEASC reports as well. And gym space is inadequate. We need more square footage to be able to support the current programs. So what we've done here is, this is a new addition. So this is the back side of the existing building right now, where the cafeteria and kitchen are. We've kind of swapped places with them, but we've put a big addition. And then in that addition, we've got new gym space, we've expanded the cafeteria square footage, and we've expanded the kitchen square footage. We've also reoriented the front door, because one of those issues you saw on the site plans was that separation of car drop-offs and pedestrians and buses, and so we're going to try and fix that somewhat in this option. So we have 2 separate entrances. On the second floor, you can see where the science department is now. We've actually traded that with an art program up here with an extended learning center. We've started to try and create those hubs of getting related programs together, but one of the big considerations in this building is that these walls that are separating the classroom, those are all bearing walls. So they're holding up the second floor, which is holding up the roof above. So anything that we do to try and change that space gets really expensive. And it's something that we, at least in this option, we said it's cost prohibitive. So one thing that we're left with here as a compromise is undersized classrooms. So we would go through this option, and you'll see what the cost looks like after, but at the end of the day, we still have classrooms that are undersized. We're getting them a little bit closer together. But that is the compromise in this renovation option. We renovate the auditorium, and one thing here, since we're building new gym space, the existing gym, which is actually starts on the second floor and goes up to the 3rd floor, we take that gym space and we divide it, because it's a high bay space, we divide it and give it another floor. So we have 2 floors in the gym, and that's where we're going to create the Science STEM Center. This little piece is a blow-up of what that kind of mezzanine level is in the middle of the gym. We get health-related classrooms, the movement studio in there, and we certainly keep administration down by the new front entrance. What this looks like on the site, Well, first we'll talk a little bit about the phasing. Similar is a little bit better because we're building more new space. So before we turn over that to its permanent use, we'll actually house students in there during construction. So you'll have a few less portable classrooms, and it may speed up the process, but you can still see it's multiple phases. From a site planning perspective, this is a different picture on the site circulation than what we have now. Here is kind of the main entrance, now on the south side of the building, Kennedy Drive, Dorset Street to orient us. The old football field has been turned into parking. We've closed off one of the curb cuts here, so we come in from a bus drop-off standpoint. Buses come in, they loop around, drop off at the front door, and then they can loop around and continue without going back onto Dorset Street, which they have to now, and come within the campus to drop students off over at the middle school. Rob had mentioned what happens in the existing parking lot, because it's actually oriented 90 degrees from what we're showing it right now, and it's almost like a speedway drive-through. So we've tried to slow people down, and we've changed the orientation of the parking lot. Parent drop-off is just coming through where the light is. They circle around, drop off at the front, and they can come back out. So separation of buses, separation of cars. We've created some access for pedestrians to go back and forth because we know how much they do that. And this satisfies Pat's paving the north parking lot question. And you can see in the orange, the darker orange, that's where the additions are located. So again, some site improvements. It's a step in the right direction. Option 3, we're even going to go further. In option 3, we're trying to address as many of the educational needs that we identified in phase 2 as we could. And again, this is a renovation addition project. And the differences here, we'll start, this line right here is where the existing entrance to the gym is. What we're proposing is to take that gym completely down and replace it with a new addition that has larger gym spaces and a related performing arts that has access, so you can have band, being able to have practice in a performance space here. The cafeteria is, the floor plan is rearranged a little bit. There's a large platform that also has access both to the cafeteria and to the gym, depending on what type of function is happening. The big change here is we're really trying to envelop the lower floor with natural light. So we've created some large openings here. This is called a Heller-up stair, and I'll show you a picture of what that looks like. But basically, it's stair paths on both ends, and in the middle, it's tiered seating that goes down. And we're finding, because we've done a lot of these now, that it's a really good way to try and deinstitutionalize the space and provide many different opportunities for students in an eating environment. And also from a teaching and learning, it becomes a multifunctional space. You can have large group presentations in there. The classrooms, you're starting to see these more often now. This is a little bit different configuration. This gets them a little bit closer and tighter together, so they're basically entering into a self-contained suite for a grade level team. They've got their extended learning area, the related classrooms, science, special ed, and breakout meeting rooms all together and contained. We're getting art closer to all of that stuff, so it's a fully integrated platform to be able to access all those different resources. When we go up to the second floor, you can see what we've done is we've actually taken away all the square footage that is here. So this would be wide open to skylights that are up on the roof. So it's bringing all natural light down that whole area of the media center. And we're doing the same over here on the cafeteria. So it becomes a 2-story space. It's going to get lots of light and solve that problem of getting light deeper into the building. Again, classrooms are arranged the way we're looking to do it in the future. We've got related special education and breakout spaces, some rooms for moving some of the administration assistant principals up to the second floor so they're closer to the students and staff that they're serving. At the high school, the renovation addition piece of this is a little bit bigger. So this is the existing front door. Basically, we're going to take right where the stairs are that you go up here off the lobby to go up to the gym. Everything south, we're proposing to take down. So this is all new construction in this area here. And what we're replacing is, you've seen the gyms here before. We've got associated weight and movement studios, kitchen and cafeteria, a black box theater. An auditorium is about twice the size of what we have right now. I think we're just under 400 seats, plus or minus in here. What we're proposing is an auditorium for 750 seats, with all of the related program spaces, scene shop that has access to the stage, theater tech program, band and chorus that are also right next to where they'll be performing, some flexible studio space, and again, we're separating a new entrance for drop-off of buses and where parents will be dropping off. We still have the same problem, because this is all existing building, of those undersized classrooms. The media center stays where it is. The auditorium, where we're standing right now, we actually we flatten out this floor, and we poke holes in all of the outside places so you can actually see out and what's happening. And this becomes a STEM lab or a fab lab, and we saw some of those pictures earlier, where we're trying to integrate all of those places and provide project learning space for those related programs. On the second floor, again, we are renovating the science wing. Where it is now, it's got extended learning areas, completely revamped science labs. We're getting related programs, again, closer together, so you have math and science next to each other. This STEM lab is open to below, so when you're upstairs, you can actually see what's happening on the floor level of that. Health program, together, and again, we've got art on the upstairs floor, kind of where the performing arts is, and these have overlooks down to the cafeteria and the black box theater below. What this looks like on site planning is pretty similar. Obviously, the additions are a little bit different. There's additions here at the middle school for the arts, and here's the gym addition. The high school, it's a much larger addition, but the orientation of the circulation is pretty similar to what I just showed you. Phasing, it's a little bit better, again, because we're creating that new space that we can use as temporary swing space. But again, you see it's fairly complicated because you have a lot of existing building left, and you've got to move through it in multiple phases. Option 4 is basically what I showed you, but one of the questions that was asked is if there was ever consideration of having to move the 5th grade up, so it became a 5-8 middle school, how could you accomplish that? Could you fit it on the site, and could you tie it in with a 6th through 8 program that I just showed you in a previous option? And the answer was quite simple: yes, we can, just by adding another 2-story wing off of that. That could be a 5th grade classroom wing. And again, it has all the same features: extended learning, breakout spaces, and special education spaces, and it fits on the site. That's really what we were trying to test. Upstairs, it's the same as the previous option I showed you below, but here's the addition for the 5th grade. So it's just another grade level team that'll be up on the upstairs. Option 5, what we were looking at here was, we heard a lot about the opportunities that take place between the middle school and high school, and we've got staff and students going back and forth. We said, what if we put the buildings together? So you ran basically autonomous middle school and an autonomous high school under one roof. There's a lot of economy of scale from a programmatic standpoint. There's potential economy of scale in operational savings. So this is something that we wanted to explore. And all of these that I'm showing you really were meant to, can we fit this stuff on the site? So while these are all very conceptual, we tried to look at these as the worst case scenario of how we would plan, because this is shown on 2 floors. We could certainly do this over 3 stories and make the footprint more compact. We said from a site planning perspective, what can we fit on the site? So now you see a pretty big building. This is the existing middle school. There's an addition for arts on the end, which you've seen before. This is that line right where the existing gym entrance is. We're taking down that existing gym. So in this particular case, this green line here is the middle school. High school, it's connected, yet separate on the other side. You can go back and forth through a corridor. You can put doors there so they can be strictly separated as well. We have middle school gymnasium space and related locker rooms on this end, and we have the high school athletic space and related locker rooms on this side, health classrooms in the back, performing arts, stage, just a little bit different rearrangement of what you've seen before. In this particular option, there still are 2 kitchens and 2 cafeterias. You'll see another one where we're trying to get more economy and we have 1 kitchen and 2 different cafeterias. The big piece here is these are 2 stories, and since we had a blank canvas, we could really start to rearrange the classrooms, get them collected the way we've all wanted to be doing. We have related programs. We have a STEM floor here on both sides. Classrooms are clustered around next to each other. Extended learning area in the beginning. We envision this as being very transparent and glassy, so you can get that passive supervision back and forth. A cafeteria that kind of wraps is also spill-out space for the auditorium for events. And again, you can see where we can separate academics, and we can separate academics on this side, and this becomes more of a community use space for after hours, where you have access to all those public spaces. On the second floor, it's similar. We've got this continue with the second floor of the academic wings. Auditorium below, they're high spaces, so that's why they show up on the second floor. A walking track around the 2 high school gymnasiums. There's an opportunity, because there's a low roof in between, that you can have a green roof, be able to access it from either side. This plan is the same as what I've showed you before. So it's an interesting arrangement. It's high density, it has them all together, and how that looks on the site. Large files. It really changes the orientation of what we have on the site. So this organizes the building portion onto the northern portion of the site. We would use the north access here just for buses. There would be some parking in here, but generally in the morning, buses come up, they drop off at the middle school, continue around, drop off at the high school, turn around, and they can come back out. This is the footprint of the existing high school. After this is built, that would come down. We'd be replacing it with fields. Again, there's that parking model. Parents can be able to come in here, loop around to drop off at the middle school, or come up here and loop around and drop off at the high school. So again, we're just testing site feasibility. Can we fit all of this program onto the site? Our conclusion is, yes, we can. There's lots of different ways to arrange this. This just happens to be one. The phasing considerations, this gets much better because we're building so much new space. And we have an existing building here that we're going to be able to use as swing space. So phase 1, we would build the new high school, keep the existing high school operating. And then what we would do is once we move the kids into the new high school, the existing high school is empty. We move the middle school over as swing space that empties out the middle school. Contractor can come in and have that whole area. So this actually increases the amount of time it takes for us to be able to do this. It condenses it. And time is equal to money here. So we're always looking for opportunities. How can we condense the construction schedule? So this is the best one of the options that we've looked at to date. Option 6 is looking at a renovation addition at the middle school and a separate new high school. So this is, I'm not going to go through this again, you've seen this. We have this model of renovated and added to middle school. It's the same as option 3. And it's the same up on the second floor as well. And here is the high school, and it's similar, the geometry is a little bit different, but all the major components are still there. And it's similar to what we showed you in option 5. But this is separated. Where it was connected before, this was just to explore if they're separated. So the second floor looks very similar. How this looks on a site plan. It's very similar to what you saw, but this was a reaction to, well, what if we didn't want to have them connected and have them separate? Site circulation remains the same. When we finished looking at this, we said, we're not sure why we would want to do something if they're that close together. There's all these opportunities for collaboration. It kind of makes sense to connect them. But we did want to look at the options, so we're covering all the bases. The phasing is as similar as what I just went through for option 5. Now we move into option 7, which is a new middle school and a new high school, standalone, separate buildings. So we have a completely blank canvas to start with. So we really were able to organize this the way we wanted. And so we have grade levels, this would be 6th grade here, where we've got related classrooms, science with them, all of the larger and small spaces kind of here in the center that relate to each of those teams. There's a fab lab or technology project lab in the middle, media center and cafeteria kind of at the heart. Here's the main entrance, administration, some outdoor learning classrooms right off of the entrance to the lobby. Here's a kitchen, mechanical space, a stage platform area relating to the cafeteria for performances. Gym space is down here in this wing. This would be 7th grade. Upstairs, similar. We've got 8th grade would be here, similar layout. And then we've got art programs, band and chorus. And the media center is actually on 2 floors connected by an internal stair, and administration here as well. So pretty compact, pretty efficient, and it hits all of those kind of next generation learning programs that we were trying to do. Standalone high school, we already had one of those models. It's just where did we put it on the site? So it's very similar to option 6. 2nd floor as well. You've seen this plan before. The geometry and the location of stuff is a little bit different, but essentially the same. And what we've done here is we looked at it and said, how do we build this in the most efficient manner? So we've swapped places from existing, where you can see now the middle school is behind the high school. Here's the footprint of the high school. So you can build that clean by itself and keep both middle school and high school up and running. The new high school is located on the varsity baseball field. Again, it's separate from the existing building. So you could build those concurrently or one after another, but it's completely independent of the existing buildings, so it's not interfering with the ongoing education day to day. And this would be the fastest construction approach. Again, the phasing here is pretty straightforward because we're having 2 new buildings, build a new middle school, move those kids in, build a new high school, move those kids in, demo the existing buildings, and replace with parking and fields. Option 8, this is our last option. This is a new middle school, high school combined. So we're not renovating the middle school in this component. This is building that new middle school. So essentially what we did is we took those 2 floor plans that I just showed you for new independent schools, married them together in a way that made a lot of sense to be able to create that autonomy. So this is kind of the dividing line, high school, middle school. The interesting piece here is we're really trying to maximize operational efficiency. So we have 1 kitchen, whereas those previous options we had 2 kitchens. So we have 1 larger kitchen serving a high school cafeteria and a middle school cafeteria. And that's a key to a middle school, high school, is that you're not sharing those core functions and mixing those age groups together. From a scheduling standpoint, it makes a lot of sense. In this particular one, we have 1 boiler plant, 1 physical plant. So instead of maintaining 2 sets of boilers, you're doing it all at once. The layout is pretty similar. The geometry, again, has changed. Classroom wings, high school gym space over here, middle school gym space down here, and the middle school academic wings. 2nd floor follows in a similar fashion. They're large files. 2nd floor, that breakdown still remains between the high school and the middle school. Upstairs, the track around the gym space, the auditorium has kind of overlooks down below, really connecting visually the 2 floors. And then the academic wings are laid out. How that fits on the site, these are just blow-ups of those things if we wanted to get into more detail, but you've seen these. 2nd floor, high school. This is the 1st floor of the middle school, just blown up, so you can see where that transition line is. Same up on the 2nd floor. You gotta make these files smaller. And then how this relates on the site. Where we place this, as you can see, this is actually about 365,000 square feet. That was the model program that we used for all of these options. This is a big building, and there wasn't a really good place to fit it in without touching our sacred cow here. So this is actually built over the footprint of the existing high school. And we're able to stage the phasing here in a couple of different ways. So you could still build the middle school first, while you keep the high school and the existing middle school running. And then we would phase how we connect those two things together. So you build that middle school first, move kids from the high school into the old middle school to be able to free up that space, and then you finish, the other half of the high school. When that's done, move the kids back to the high school, demolish the middle school. Parking ends up over on this side. We've got parent drop-off here for the middle school, so they're separate. And then we've got, bus drop-off for both places, being able to come all the way around the building. So again, this is phased, but it's pretty clean because we'll be able to do stuff outside of the footprint. So the next piece I have to talk about this is the good news, is the cost of all of these things. And there's a couple of things that I just wanted to talk about before I show you the slide with the good news. Is we looked at this to try and give you some apples to apples comparisons for all these options. So the assumptions that we made the same assumptions, the same square footage for all the options, the same types of programs. The things that were changing was how we phased it, how much money you're spending on temporary space, and the duration of construction because of the complexity of it. So these are comparative in costs. Option one, and again, option one was just fixing up what we have, but instead of spreading that out over consecutive years, we bundled it up and said, we're going to do all of it as a project to extend the life of the building for 50 years. If we did it as a project, that project cost is $55 million. These are all project costs, so it's kind of a soup to nuts. It's not just construction, it's soft costs, furnishings and equipment, fees and permits, and all of that stuff is wrapped up into this price. So to get 50-year buildings, apples to apples, option one is considered a project doing it all at once. You could extend that out over a long period of time. It's just going to get more expensive. Escalation on construction is anywhere between 3 to 5% a year. 3 to 5% a year on those numbers is a pretty big number. Option two in yellow, that was limited educational improvements. We took the top 3 priorities from each. As soon as we start moving around walls, it gets expensive. So these are for both middle school and high school together. Option two came in at about $136 million. Option 3 or 4, which were renovations and additions, similar except for where we added the 5th grade onto that one wing. So that's why you see the difference. Option 3 at $182 million and option 4 at $192 million. That difference is adding 5th grade. So there's actually more square footage in that option. Option 5 and 6 range somewhere between $174 and $177 million. That's a renovation addition, both of those projects. Options 7 and 8 are our new construction options. And the surprising thing here when we came out is that new construction, you can see that cost range pretty much overlaps with renovation. The big piece of that is the amount that you would save, you would think on a renovation, you're paying for those temporary spaces that go away at the end. So it kind of levels that playing field. So that was, somewhat surprising to us to see. We thought we would see a little bit more economy there, but it gives you some good information to be able to make some decisions moving forward. I'm going to turn this back to Bridget, who's going to give us a little summary of what our homework exercise is this evening.
Thank you, Lee.
Yep.
All right, so we have provided you with a ton of information. You probably feel like you're drinking from the fire hose. So before we break for questions and feedback, I'd like to summarize what Phase 2 has shown us. One, it's shown us that it's going to cost a lot of money just to extend the life of the buildings in terms of infrastructure. We have enrollments that are increasing over the 10-year and beyond window. We are over capacity at the high school currently, and we have some concerns about the size of different spaces at the middle school. In general, though, there we are okay in terms of capacity. In terms of educational delivery, there have been significant changes in how we're delivering education in South Burlington since these buildings were built. And we are really bumping into our buildings, so to speak, and both buildings as we try to deliver that program. And it's going to continue to evolve over time. And costs, we really need to think as a community about what is our best value. Where should we make what kind of investment should we make, and where is our money best spent? So the board has a challenging decision to make in the next several weeks. Do we fix infrastructure only and extend the life of these buildings for another 50 years, at which point we'll have 100-year-old buildings, and we'll need to make another decision at that point as a community? Do we renovate around the edges and try to make small changes that will support educational delivery? Or do we make a bigger investment that will have a much bigger impact on current and future educational delivery methods? As one input to our decision-making, the board is asking the community to provide feedback in multiple ways. So you have the exit card that you got when you came in, or there are more of them out there. Basically, we are asking, if you were the board, which direction would you go? Do nothing and continue to fix infrastructure issues as they arise, focus on fixing the infrastructure only and extend the life of the buildings, or address as many of the current and future educational needs as possible through additions and renovation or new construction. And we'd love you to write some words along with what you check off on that exit card if you can, if you have the time. One question that has arisen as we've talked to community members in our visioning sessions is this discussion of whether the middle school and high school should be connected, and people have different opinions on that, so we'd love to hear what you think about that, both by circling one of these and by giving us a few words about that. And then we just sort of had some open-ended questions we'd like you to take the time to answer if you would be so kind. So what was the most interesting thing you learned tonight? What questions do you still have? And do you have other thoughts or general comments you'd like to share? So the next steps are that the board needs to make a decision which direction we're going to go, decide if we're going to take any project forward, and if so, which option would kind of be the kernel of where we jump off from. If we decide to take any project forward, there would be another planning phase, a phase 3, if you will, and there will be multiple points during that planning phase for public input into design and specifications of any type of project. So what we would ask of you is really to spread the word. There are a lot of folks who are obviously not here tonight. We thank all of you, given the busy schedule this time of year, for joining us tonight, and we would love it if you would continue to talk about this with other community members. If any of you need further information, or if anyone else needs further information, we would ask that you please visit the school website. We have a new Director of Communications, Corey Burdick, and she has been doing a great job of reorganizing the information on the Master Planning and Visioning tab so it's more accessible and easier to get through. And please reach out to the school board as well with any questions that you have, and we'll direct them to the right person. And so with that, we are going to spend a few minutes taking comments and questions. There are some microphones, and we'll sort of circulate with them, and we will do our best as board member, superintendent, architects, principals to answer those questions. And then out in the lobby, we have posters with all the detailed options, and we will be circulating out there as well, just for one-on-one conversations or any questions you might have out there. So thank you very much for all the time you've given us so far, and we look forward to answering your questions. Thanks. Anyone?
Hi, Bridget.
Hi.
What is the projected timeline if something were to be
Sure.
pushed through? What are you looking at?
So phase 2, the board really hopes to come to some kind of conclusion about which direction we should take really within the next several weeks. So we haven't chosen the board meeting at which we will actually take a vote as to what we should explore further, but sometime in the next few weeks before school is out is what we're really hoping. And then if we are to take a project forward, there would be a phase 3 that would really start over the summer, and we would start to work with an architect to actually design a project if there is a project involved. And the hope would be that we would either have something for the community to vote on either in the spring of next year at town meeting day or in the fall at the very latest of next year. So that's kind of the time frame that we're on. Other questions?
Oh, right. I noticed you showed some pictures of the middle school or middle school benchmarks, Shelburne Community School in particular. Mm-hmm. Well, I was just curious on the high school level, were you looking at sort of model high schools from some state, Massachusetts, or the prestigious area that you want to replicate? Is that your process?
We did. We took a group of faculty and administrators, and I went as well as a representative of the board, and the architects really organized it. And we went to Massachusetts. And Massachusetts has been building schools at a very fast pace because there's state funding outside of the property tax model to support that funding. So they have been sort of building a lot of schools in a very quick time frame. So we saw a number of high schools as well, and some of them that have aspects that we really liked, and some of them that provided a little bit of a cautionary tale. One thing that we found that was interesting in Massachusetts is that there were some high schools where they really went and tried to build a next generation high school along the lines of what we would hope for if we decided to take some kind of new project forward. But they had not done the work that South Burlington's already done to change teaching methods. So right now, we've already done a lot of that visioning work. We've done a lot of the changes in teaching methods. There's more we could do with new buildings, but really new buildings would sort of help facilitate this mindset that we've already developed in South Burlington, whereas a few of the high schools that we saw were absolutely beautiful buildings, and they were trying to cram very traditional teaching into these beautiful new buildings. So it was a very interesting trip that we took to Massachusetts. We learned a lot from it. We don't have a lot of slides for some reason in the presentation from those specific high schools, but yeah. Yep.
What is the timeline for the new construction? Like, if we get the go-ahead and we go, you kind of phased us through 3 or 4 years of renovation timeline, but what is it if...
Lee, would you like to answer that a little bit more precisely than I could?
Sure. There you go, Mike.
So the new construction options obviously would be the fastest, and we're looking for the size of these buildings to construct each of them somewhere between an 18 and 24-month time frame versus 3 to 4 years on some of the renovation options, so it's considerably faster.
And Lee, can you give us a little bit of guidance as to how long after a bond vote it would take to sort of get something up and running? So
Sure.
from now until when something new is actually there, how long would that period be?
Sure, so after an approved funding vote, there's about a 9 to 10 month design period for the final design to get bid documents ready for contractors. And then once that is awarded to a contractor, then you're 18 to 24 months if it's new construction, and some of the other options, 3 to 4 years.
Okay, other questions?
Sandy Dooley, I just was wondering, has anyone, would we be thinking about a 20-year bond, a 30-year bond, and what kind of impact would that be on a typical house property tax bill in a year, or a typical condominium? Or...
We, of course, have thought about that. We have not gotten into those details yet because, as Lee tried to preface the cost page, this was sort of to try to get comparative costs between these options. Which one's higher, which one's lower. Any design phase would have to take into account a lot of feedback from the community about what cost it's willing to support, as well as what we really want in terms of details in these buildings and where we're willing to make some compromises to cut back on costs. So we have not gone to the step of putting that into what the impact would be on an individual homeowner or per $100,000 of property value, only because we don't want people to fixate on these hard numbers. We want people to look at them more as comparisons between the different types of projects that we could do. Yes.
I would just respectfully suggest that I think it's going to be all important to have some reasonably accurate figures as to what the tax impact is going to be as people are weighing these various options.
Thank you. Yes.
Are there any renovations coming up for any of the elementary schools that the community should be aware of? Or maybe a need for a renovation?
So in the background, of course, we are monitoring all of the elementary schools, and we know that we have challenges at each of them. So for example, we're still trying to understand the challenge in terms of noise at Chamberlain, health and safety there. We are still trying to understand the impact of City Center and what that is going to be at Central School. We have had challenges at Orchard with enrollment numbers, and we're sort of at capacity at Orchard at the moment. At the moment, there is no project on the books for any of them, but we are still in the background continuing to examine those issues. So for now, nothing yet.
Hi. Kind of in line with that, sorry, I'm a little sick. I was wondering, this is all really exciting stuff, and I know when we talked about changing the elementary schools a few years ago, there was a lot of community concern, and it didn't go very well. I feel like we can all agree. And I was just wondering if you feel like you guys have reflected on that and maybe learned new ways to approach the community that might, like this gentleman suggested, giving figures kind of up front, and I think, I don't know, just to get people a little bit more open-minded to the idea before having to vote on it.
We appreciate that feedback. Yes, we have certainly learned some lessons from that. That was also a very different situation. So we were trying to be very quick and timely in response to an offer that we had for one of the schools, and we were trying to examine whether that was the right thing to do as fiduciaries of the district's assets. This one, we have a little bit more time, and we're on a little bit more of our own schedule. So like I said, we're trying to be open with what we know about costs, and we are trying to be as transparent as we can be, and we will continue to share with the community as we learn more and as we get feedback on what options the community would like to see in any kind of project. We'll continue to be transparent about what that does to the cost to raise or lower it. So.
Bridget, I think what Mr. Scollins brought up around the accuracy, obviously if that was a direction that the board went to one of those options, we absolutely would want to make sure that we provide you with as much information as we do today on the budget impacts that we have around the tax rate. So we have always done that, and we would want to make sure to do the same once we were able to lock down an option, if that was the direction.
Okay. Any more? One last question, maybe?
Just sort of a follow-up, David. I think it would be helpful, I'm sort of confused. This is the first time I heard this, so there's a lot to take in. But as I move forward with trying to provide some decent input, I think it would be helpful for at least the top several options that the school board thinks are viable to specifically have the tax impact for each of those. And then I could say, I could weigh the balances and say, well, maybe 3 cents more, I would go with this, rather than have all of the conversation and we land on the final decision and then we find out the tax impact.
Thank you for that feedback, and the board certainly has a lot more conversation to do before we come to any kind of conclusion about what to move forward, so we'll take that on board. Thank you.
So just back to the timing, if at your next few board meetings you decide we want to go with the new build, then can you get on the ballot sort of at the next cycle, or is it going to be tied to like City Center? We had to go through whatever that funding package was, or because it's all on school land, does that mean you kind of, once you make a decision, as long as you get approval, the public behind you, you can move forward, or are we going to get slowed down with processing?
We don't have quite the same considerations that City Center does because, as you said, it is direct impact to property tax, and there aren't sort of these other issues about TIF district and those kinds of things involved. It won't be on the next immediate ballot, though, because, as Lee mentioned, before we can really put something on the ballot, we do need to dive deep into what the design is and really ask voters for what we're going to need to do that building. And calculate exact, what we expect to be the impact on taxes of debt service. So we'll have to do that. So as I said, probably we're hoping for next spring. We're hoping for a town meeting of next spring. And if the process is taking longer than that or we're not quite there, we're hoping at the latest next fall.
I'm interested in whether there's easily readable research, for the non-expert about the impacts of different things on educational outcomes or ends in terms of, I'm particularly interested in light, but also different configurations, and if there's anything to be said about connecting the two schools. That could be put on the website. I'm not expecting you to necessarily provide that right now.
Right. There are definitely some studies on natural light and some of those things. As far as I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, Lee, I don't know of any studies about the educational impact of connecting or not connecting the middle and high school and that kind of grade configuration. What I will say is that right now there's a fair amount of trying to share resources between the two. So if you come to the parking lot during the day, you have a pretty good chance of seeing middle schoolers trekking over to the high school for band or music or other activities and trekking back and forth. And having talked to Principal Burke, there are lots of opportunities that could potentially be housed at the middle school, but there's a challenge of getting high school students to get over the idea that going to the middle school is not something they want to do. So there are definitely things that are appealing about the middle school and high school being connected. There have obviously been some concerns from some parents about just how separate they would still be kept if they are in the same building. So there are lots of pros and cons to weigh on both of those sides, but I don't know of any specific research that's looked at grade configurations of 6 through 12 education in that way. But we will certainly share everything that we have on the website for those who are interested. Okay, I think at this point we're, oh, I'm sorry, does someone have the mic for one last question or no? Okay, I think at this point, since it's 8:15, and we wanted to give you some time to wander around and look more closely at some of the options that are on posters in the lobby and ask us sort of one-on-one questions, I think that we should probably wrap it up. David, did you want to say anything else? Okay.
8:45, we're on time. I think
Okay.
it gives people the time to get to you're going to go over the displays that we have in the lobby.
Yeah, so the lobby basically has blown up displays of each of the options. So both the layout of them, the floor plans of them, as well as the site plan and the phasing. And so you're welcome to walk around, ask questions, just get a little closer look at those, because we know that that presentation, just because there are 8 options, we had to move through it pretty quickly. So feel free to take your time out there. And right now, the middle school also has them up in the lobby, and my understanding was that Pat was going to try to keep them up in the lobby here so that, when parents are dropping off students, I've seen a lot of students, especially at the middle school because I'm in and out there a lot of students really spending some time in between classes or at lunch having a look at those potential plans.
Great, and we'll be circulating out in the lobby too. If you have questions you want to approach any of us, we'll do our best to answer your question. And the exit card, when you do finish it, and there's a box out there where you can deposit your exit card.
Okay, thank you very much for taking the time tonight. We really appreciate it.